Welcome to Ray-ality TV. I'm Raymond Bakari. Today I'm joined by Adriana Bonilla, who is the Republican candidate for Rhode Island State Senate District 6, which is located in Providence. Adriana, how are you today?
I'm great. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely, and thank you for giving me your time for this interview. I know things are very busy as we're now just 10 days away from Election Day. Currently, for those watching, we're filming this on Saturday, October 29th. My first question, it's a bit of a general one. What made you want to run for elected office?
So I decided to run because one, I obviously am a mom. I mean, my son is on the younger end because he is a toddler, but regardless, I've been in the school system for a couple years. So I've worked in charter schools, I've worked in public schools, and I've worked all grades, working with Spanish special needs currently. And I just didn't like the direction we were headed. It was heartbreaking to me to see their levels of where they were reading, writing. It's just very depressing that I would see a student I personally know that he was in 12th grade and he was reading at a first grade level. So I think we need to bring it back to just focusing on those issues more. We've kind of gotten really away from that, and we just start teaching some other stuff that maybe isn't as necessary. Because we just honestly want our kids to be successful and just have the basic stuff they need to, whether they go to like the Marines or something of service, or if they become a paramedic, whatever it is they want to do in their career or whatever it is. But we just want them to have the proper resources. So I have felt front and center. I see that that's not happening. Not only that, but in my community specifically, a lot of people, there's a lot of language barriers, which I actually am able to speak Spanish. So knocking on doors, they didn't know who their representatives are, whether it was state, whether it was whatever the positions were. They actually didn't know who represented them. So I was like, wow, that's alarming because, well, who do you go to if you need help or if there's a certain issue in your area? So I just thought they weren't adequately represented. They could get better representation. And sometimes I just think that sometimes you just need somebody new, fresh ideas, just somebody who could relate to them, being a mom, being in the school system. And I got started first with the landlords because I actually own my house. And I first started just testifying and stuff like that. And then um, the people, when I knocked on the doors, I'm like, oh, did you know you can go to the state house? You can send emails. You can go several days out of the week. It blew my mind that they didn't know these things. And I'm like, oh, how could these people not know this? Like, that's just like flabbergasting. So there's a lot of groundwork that needs to be done, especially in this area of District 6, just to even just bring that awareness and that knowledge. And I let them know that you guys, it doesn't matter if you oppose. I'm not going to tell you to oppose something, to be in favor of it. Just do your homework and then you decide how it is you feel, but do voice your opinions.
Speaking of education, which was a big part of that answer, one of your main priorities is, if elected, to ensure transparency in education and parental rights. How would that look legislatively?
So, there's a lot going on in Providence schools. Honestly, it feels like it's an onion. I always say it's an onion because there's so many layers, and it's like, oh my goodness, why is this so complicated? We have the state takeover, we have Javier, the superintendent, we have Angelica Infante, then we have still the board. And I hear from parents several times, like, why is this so complicated? If I have an issue, who do I go to? Now we have this new idea to vote, and it says that we supposedly get a say in who these people are, which that's a start if we were able to pick people. But then my question is, do we actually have enough confidence in the new mayor? Because maybe in the end he just decides the people anyways. So that's just where I'm like, okay, are we actually gonna have a say? Because we also have oversight committee about 2 or 3 times a month, and I've also testified in that. And there's just a lot of frustrations you hear from whether it's staff or whatever it is, that there is no transparency. So an example of that is the state takeover. They said till 2027. How is it that us working in there, or even the families, we all have to find out on the news? Like, that's just very alarming. It's something that's sad. I think you could have told this at least, like had meetings with us in the community, something of that sort. Ever since we've had this state takeover, I don't know that it's pushed us forward. I feel like sometimes we go backwards instead. So I think transparency is we need to have a say from the community. We need to have a say from the people who actually work there and just sit at the table more and do more of these conversations that maybe aren't always uh, some people find them like kind of controversial, but I mean, I think you need to have them if we need to know what's the best interest of the population that we're serving because Providence has a lot of schools. It's a very large area that it covers, as well as some parents, they just want to know what their kids are learning in the classroom, especially now that they're so on the computer, like almost everything. They don't really get as much paper. I'm kind of concerned that they don't even get homework. I'm like, you guys don't get homework? I had a ton of it.
And the sad reality is a lot of those schools in Providence are failing. The test scores are down. We don't know what the RICAT scores are because they're delayed, but I assume that they're going to show similar results in that regard. Speaking of education, it is a multi-layered issue, like you mentioned with the onion metaphor. I like that. School choice is a big issue that your party is favoring in recent years and bringing into the limelight. How do you feel about school choice?
So I'm in favor of it because I feel ultimately not all kids are learning the same way. All kids, they have different needs. Some of them they might need more. Personally, myself, I'm horrible at math. I won't even lie. So I might need more support and more time, but I might be falling behind because maybe there's too many kids in that classroom. So, sometimes smaller classrooms, just different environments for different kids. So some kids, maybe they thrive in a public school, maybe another one thrives in a charter school, another one completely different. They might just tell the kid he has ADHD, but realistically, they might just need one-on-one attention and they might actually thrive in homeschool. So I'm for school choice, rather that's homeschool, rather that's religion or however it is. I think ultimately parents have to make that decision and just kind of decide, I think we know the kids best and what is it that we see fit and just go from there. But obviously make it accessible because well, buses are a mess. RIPTA, let's not even go there. But something that's accessible, that's close to some people, because not everybody has access to a car still. Plus, gasoline prices aren't that great.
And education, it's easy to say that high school students are having big issues, which they are. But sometimes those issues with education start a lot earlier. I'm typically from the left. You hear this, but even the candidate for governor, Ashley Kalis, the Republican candidate, supports this, and that's the idea of universal pre-K to address this at years before it actually becomes an issue. Where do you stand on the idea of universal pre-K?
So I do think that's a good idea just because again, I worked in both of them. Uh Public, I worked in charter, and again, we have to give more choice because how is it that you're going to keep a kid entrapped if it's in a failing school? We need to give them options. But then what's also hard that I find an issue is the waiting list is like me trying to win the lotto. Like that's just insane. There's like 19,000 plus kids, and so it's just really sad that you almost make the families feel like, am I stuck? And they shouldn't feel that. You know what I'm saying? Like we need to give better supports in those areas.
Shifting to public safety, which is also up there in the issues on voters' minds in Providence, there are calls to defund the police, and in some cases, which your opponent has talked about on Twitter, abolish the police, completely get
Oh,
rid of it. How do you feel about those calls?
okay. Um, I have always think I've been clear. I do not go to abolish. I do not condone any burning of cars. That was very extreme to me to burn cars, to lash out and just these buildings. They destroy people's businesses. That was their livelihoods. I get it. You're exercising your right, your First Amendment, but I think there's a more positive manner and to do that. But I truly do believe in law and order. I do believe in working alongside with the police. Actually, in 2017, they actually created the Community Relations Bureau, which I find interesting because it's trying to not only produce strategies for crime reduction, but they're actually trying to show their presence in the community. So they'll go to meetings. They're kind of just trying to normalize again that they're people that, we're here to help the community. Sometimes I used to like to see when you would see them play ball with the kids. I thought that was cool. And you would just see them out in your community, and it was something, they would go for ride-alongs. I was always for that. Because sadly, like I work in a high school, and you hear them like, oh, saying all these derogatory things. And I'm like, you guys have no idea. Like, I actually was in police academy, which is not very well known. And when I went in it, it's a whole different thing. Like, once you step your foot in their shoes, you just have a more respect for them because they have no idea what they're going to walk into. They don't know if they're going to go back home. They risk their lives daily, you know. So I actually have family that has served as well. So I always say there's good and bad in all things of life. Obviously, we need accountability, but no, I'm not for defunding them. And a lot of people of my area have said, you know, we've had thefts, like where they were stealing tires in Providence for a bit. The park that was actually at, there was somebody shot. Like, there's various issues. So at the end of the day, I think we always need more resources and not less, because sometimes, you know, we do have in Providence or just other areas, domestic violence, stuff of that nature. So I think we need to work alongside with them and make it kind of like they're people, we're people. Some of them look like me and you, they're minorities too. So yeah, that's pretty much my take.
Alongside those calls to abolish and defund the police, you'll sometimes hear calls to repeal Leobor, which for those watching is the Law Enforcement Officers Bill of Rights. But there are in the middle solutions. So you talked a bit about community policing, which is what you were describing. Some people will say, well, instead of repealing Leobor, let's reform it. Mandate body cameras, for example. Should Leobor be repealed, reformed, or stay the same?
So I am for the body cameras, because then it shows both ends. It's protection for the police officer and it's also protection for the individual as well. I'm not for completely repealing because there is instances where I've had personal people close to me that if Leobor wasn't in protection, then I don't know. It's just an interesting concept because I feel like a lot of people have some type of protection in their job. So unions, you know, being a teacher, they have, you know, their unions. There's various unions that do protect. But I think accountability, you can have some when you have the body cameras and you're analyzing those things. And obviously, depending on their trainings and stuff, that's always good to just see what's working and what's not working.
This next one I have is another big topic in Providence, which is the presence of SROs, school resource officers, in the schools. Like public safety, the other two issues we talked about, they're just strong issues on both, strong opinions on both sides. Some just don't want SROs at all in schools. There are some saying we desperately need them because if you have a scuffle going on between two students, the teacher is very limited in what they can and can't do in order to stop that scuffle from happening. What are your thoughts on SROs in schools?
Okay, so one, I work in a very large school. I am most definitely for them because I firsthand have seen how we had an SRO, they got removed, and then you have to wait about 4 minutes. 4 minutes doesn't seem like a long time, but that could literally be like a life or death sentence. And that's not even to be extreme because some kids, believe it or not, they actually can have weapons on them. Like there was a time that one of them actually had a taser. There's been a time one had a knife, whatever other things. So again, that goes back to we need to be working together, and just normalizing them. And it doesn't have to be they have to be fearful of them because that's not the intent either. But I am for them because we've had several instances where I'm currently at, and I don't understand logically how you're saying you don't want one, but you're going to call for one when there could have been one there in the first place. That doesn't make sense to me logically. So I feel that I am in favor of them because if we're going to talk about safety and resources, then I think we do need a lot of help because um there's a number of one like there's more than one issue. Like kids constantly they leave all times of day of the building. They just do. And so, how are you ensuring these parents that they're actually safe? Like, is there a way to do that? So, I feel as a mom, I personally feel more safe if I'm like, okay, there's an extra body in there. We don't have to wait those 4+ minutes because, again, that could be a situation that we don't have enough time, and we definitely want to avoid that. This is to prevent those type of situations. So, I'm for them.
And you're in that environment, so you'd probably have a stance on this. Sometimes when they say get rid of the SROs, they'll say let's have a social worker instead. Is that a valid alternative?
So, okay, I'm for social workers because I understand that there's a lot of trauma and there's a lot of things that a lot of our kids get, but I don't think that they are equipped in the sense when there's a knife or how to de-escalate those situations. I don't think that they have the proper training for that.
Moving on to an issue that's more statewide, which is the truck tolls. The state and the governor is going to appeal them, even after a judge said they were unconstitutional. And this one's a bit of a multi-layered issue too, like every issue facing Rhode Island. Since there's a case for the revenue it makes, but then there's concerns of the impact that it would have rising prices on goods if you're going to have these truck companies, pay these tolls. And then there's the concern that if this appeal loses, the General Assembly will say, "Well, they told us we can't appeal only trucks, so all cars are going to get tolled too." Do you support or oppose these tolls?
No, I think they're not a good idea. Because one, again, I do believe in the Constitution. So going by the Constitution, it was unconstitutional, as well as it makes me concerned with the people who actually make their living through that. So the people who are truckers, Uber, taxi drivers, like all of those type of people, they're going to be affected one way or another. And that's their livelihood. And actually, my husband does that as another type of side job because you could just never have enough jobs with this economy.
So is it fair to say you would also oppose tolls going to cars as well?
Yes.
Moving on to another hot button issue in Rhode Island. This is also statewide, which is the conversation around access to abortion. Uh, your opponent is in favor of taxpayer funded abortions, and the EACA, which for those watching is the Equality and Abortion Coverage Act, which would be in the state budget if passed and fund abortions for those who use Medicaid and are on the state employee health insurance plan. Where do you stand on the EACA?
So this is always apparently the sole issue. At least people keep painting it as it is. Although in my mind, not one of my constituents has actually mentioned that to me. So as most of us always say in 2019, obviously it was codified, but me personally, no, I would not support it, due to the fact that they seem to just leave certain parts out of what this actually is. So that means that in Rhode Island, you can actually do that up until the 6 months that you can terminate the child. I personally am not for elective abortions. I think that there should be some type of limit in place. Because when I've actually spoke to people, they were like, wait, what? That supports till the 6 month? Like, wow. And I'm like, yes, this is because they kind of make it a one-sided issue where the other person, if they decide they support life, they kind of get attacked for it, just like Ashley gets attacked or Fung, several of these big seats. But I think it's like a coin that you have to look at it on both sides. I'm nobody to tell people what to do, but there are resources that do help these women because there's We Heart Lives. They actually helped with baby showers recently. We have Mother of Life on Federal Hill. We have several resources. They just don't publicize them, I feel, because they just make this like one-sided, honestly. And having the same trouble that Ashley mentioned, I also had preeclampsia, which was a difficulty to actually give birth to my son. But other than that, I would like to empower and let people know again that there are resources. But end of the day, balls in their court, and I mean they're gonna decide. But I don't support that.
One question I do want to ask is less focused on policy. Every election cycle, people will either say or hear these attacking points. Typically, they come from the left. They'll say Republicans are racist. They'll say they're sexist or homophobic or that it's a party of old white men. But I mean, you're not any of those things. I would
I've been
assume.
called actually, I have been called a few of those. That's interesting because I have been called a few of those.
I do want to ask though, when you hear those attacking points, what's your response when you hear them?
Okay, so I've been called racist, which I'm like, I don't understand because I'm a minority too, so I'm confused. And I think the term is just kind of thrown out there a lot more recently. Like I even hear little children say that, and I'm like, you guys might not even know what that word actually means. Which is kind of a disservice because then, like people are not actually using it in the correct type of term, which is like that's sad because that's still something that does occur, but obviously, I don't think we should just be just throwing it out there like it's like candy or something. But there's so many terms like I've been called myself a bigot. I'm not a bigot because I draw the line at my son, I want him to just play with his toys, read, write, and just we'll get to those other topics of sexual pleasures, whatever, when I feel best see fit, and not as people that are like actually running an office decide that this is fit and they're gonna teach him about anal oral sex. Sorry for that, but that's how literally is what they're trying to teach them. And then all of a sudden, I'm the bad guy. Well, I don't think I'm the bad guy because naturally don't we all want to protect our kids? Like, I think we can come to that agreement. Um, there's attacks again, I said, because you're for life. There's several attacks constantly. You could literally just say, like, I believe in God, and then there's an attack. Or just automatically, I've heard so much of this term. Everybody's so like focused on Trump. And I'm like, this is why Rhode Island is probably a mess, because we don't even focus on our own backyard. Like, we're not running against Trump. We're running against opponents here of Rhode Island. So can we focus on the very issues that are within our own state? And not only that, but like when they get questioned on stuff, they kind of like want you to feel sorry for them. But then if I get attacked, I just have to stay mute. Like, no. Because if you're calling me a Trumpster, well, I don't have to be Trumpster just because I'm Republican. I could simply be for conservative values. Um, and I'll admit, we just had more money in our pocket then. There's nothing wrong with saying that publicly, that we had more money in our pocket, that I didn't have to worry about formula on the shelf, or that the gas wasn't going up so much. So yeah, those are several attacks. I especially keep seeing it in this cycle, that it's getting very, I think they're feeling the heat truly, because they're not used to, we have a lot more people running this time around. This is school committee, this is House, Senate, governor, whatever. There's a ton of people that are being challenged. So they were so accustomed to nobody was challenging them. They would just get the seat. So I think they're actually feeling the heat, that more people have decided, I'm tired, I've had enough, and at least let's try and get ourselves out there and hope for the best, and that we can actually take these seats over.
And I am noticing a lot more candidates that are either independent slash right leaning and Republican running in Providence. For example, you have yourself, Nayoka, Chris Ireland, Nayoka Powell, Chris Ireland, Ivan Montanez, Alan Waters in CD1, Mayor Fung in CD2, because my part of Providence is in that district.
Uh-huh.
And it's arguably, and this isn't tokenism in any way, a more diverse ticket than it's ever been before for Republican parties in Rhode Island. Do you know? I mean, from the top to bottom, more diverse than actually the Democratic side. Are you noticing any inroads within Providence?
Yeah, all those people you mentioned, see, my background, my family is Cuban Colombian, Nayoka's part Jamaican, Ivan is actually part Colombian as well. So yeah, we all have different types of backgrounds, and I think that with these different types of backgrounds, we're able to, better help our community, because since we are members of the community, then we know what they're going through, what issues might be in their minds at the time.
My final question is a non-political topic. It's famous on the show and a tradition to always ask this at the end. I like it takes a step away from the political issues. In your opinion, what do you think Rhode Island is best known for?
First, a caveat is I actually was not from here. I have like 9 or 10 years because I was from California. But I've learned some interesting stuff about the Rhode Island people. The Dell's lemonade, they definitely do that. The what do they call them? Pizza strips.
Yep.
I personally, I need cheese though.
Really? You don't like the pizza strips? Oh
No.
man.
The Newport mansions are always mentioned, all the beaches and the coastlines and all of that. I also discovered when I was in Johnson and Wales, a lot of people, even if it's cold, they drink cold drinks like all year. So I'm like, oh, that's quite interesting. And then I've tried to come accustomed to it, is like the way that they enunciate, they don't really enunciate their R's.
Yep.
So like, oh, like let's get in the car. And I'm like, the car? Or like bubbler, just things like that. I'm like, oh, okay. But I definitely, one of the reasons I did actually like it here was because it's very diverse. There's like so many different foods you can try from so many different cultures. And I just think that's awesome, because coming from California, we had like 3 nationalities in my high school. I was none of those. It was just Guat, Salvadorian, Mexican, and that was pretty much most of the food. So here, even though it's considered a small state, obviously compared to much larger state, there's just so much awesome food you can just try. And I'm definitely a foodie. Like, I like food.
It's very true though. All those things you had mentioned about what Rhode Island's best known for. You might have to work on the Rhode Island accent when you do, if you do get in the General Assembly, because you got to say it like this point of order, Mr. Speaker, or I parked my car over there. It's very true. I'm glad you brought that up because it's very true, especially the
Well,
bumplets.
it's because my professor, one time I was trying to understand, I was trying to see what it was he was saying, and I'm like, hold on, I need like a minute or two.
It's so true, and we're like one of the only two states that say bubbler instead of water fountain or
That's
whatever it's
that's what
called.
I was accustomed to. So I was like, wait, you call it that? I'm like, oh, okay, well, that's something new.
Yeah,
We
and
didn't even have that many Dunkins either. That's like all over here.
really not in California, like, as big of a state
I
as it
think there
is.
was like at the time there was like maybe one or two. That was about it. They
Interesting.
were like more, since they're West Coast, they were more like Starbucks, although it's way more expensive, but they were more into like Starbucks and other type like Coffee Bean and stuff.
Makes sense. How's the Carl's Jr. and those kind of restaurants? Those are very exclusive over there. I don't think
Oh,
we
I
have
miss
any here.
In-N-Out. You guys need one. And
We
it's
we may.
affordable because I went to Texas to visit my dad. Could you believe the double meat was only $8? I'm like, oh my God, I need that because now you go to Burger King, you spend like $30.
Or you go to Five Guys and you need the salary of Five Guys to afford one meal. That was a bad joke. But Adriana, I think that's a good place to wrap things up. Thank you so much for giving me your time for this interview. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
And thank you for watching this episode of Ray-ality TV. If you want to see future episodes as soon as they're posted on this channel, please click the subscribe button down below and the post notification bell icon to the right of it. I'm Raymond Bakari, and I'll see you on the next episode.